Today I'm speaking with Rachel Aschliman. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, hi.
It's good to finally meet you. I've been looking at some of your YouTube videos, and I'm so glad we finally get a chance to connect. And could you tell us where you are today?
I am in Austin, Texas, at
Gotcha.
my house where I live.
And you just moved, right?
I did 2 weeks ago. Moved here for a job.
What's it been like so far?
Been good. Meeting some people here and there, doing some hiking. Yeah, it's been warm. I like warm weather, so
Very
that's
cool.
good.
I've heard good things about Austin. Well, I do want to just mention a couple things about you. I don't know too much, so we'll get to know you as we do the interview. But Rachel is in, again, Austin, Texas right now, but she has a degree in graphic design. And you've also done some stand-up comedy around Chicago. Is that right?
Yes, yeah.
What got you into that?
I honestly, when I was 16, I thought, if I'm not married by the time I'm 24, I'm going to try and make it as a comedian. But I never got married. And by the time I was 34, still not married, like, oh, well, I'm just going to go to Chicago and take classes at the Second City and try my hand at it. So that's why.
Very cool. I don't have the guts to do that myself. Occasionally I come up with a good joke, but I think I'm a little bit too, takes me too long to come up with funny stuff to say, but that's awesome. It's a good skill. Do you end up telling a lot of jokes like at your parties and stuff?
I went to a meetup yesterday, actually, and they told me that I should be a comedian, and I'm very deadpan. So I guess, I mean, I'm not like a clown. I don't tend to want to steal the show, I'm just
Right.
more sarcastic and witty, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I think we definitely need some of that these days. That's good. And the last thing I know about you is that you have a YouTube channel. Again, it's called Rachel Aschliman, which I'll have the link for beneath our video. So everyone, please go like, subscribe, check out her videos. Could you tell us a little bit before we get into the interview, what motivated you to start your YouTube channel? What will people find there, and what do you think you'll be doing with the content in the next year or two?
Well, I've been on YouTube, I think, since 2011, just posting random videos that I made with my family and my nieces and nephews. That's a different channel. And then I moved back from Chicago to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I came out of the closet, and I wanted to start a YouTube channel that I called Fort Wayne Famous, interviewing other LGBT people, having them tell their coming out stories. But I found out people aren't really interested in telling their story around Fort Wayne. They're just very, I don't know, I guess shy. But I had a few people, some of my friends did it, and that was fun. But I couldn't find enough people to want to come on and tell their stories. So that's still up, but I don't do anything with that. And then this Rach, actually, I had the idea to read my journals from when I was a Christian, read them and comment on them as an atheist. So I just started doing that and using my editing and graphic design skills. And then the pandemic hit, and I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I don't know where I'm going to go, where I'm going to take it. I'm going to keep it though, but maybe if I get a girlfriend, we'll talk on there. I don't know, because I'm just not sure what direction it's going to take.
Well, from what I saw, you definitely sounds like you've got some interesting stories to tell and a lot of insights. What is it like just going through old journals? Because I've thought about doing that at some point. I'll probably do something similar with my channel, but does it hurt to go through some of the old things and kind of dredge up the old memories?
It's not necessarily painful. It's more annoying. Like, I get so frustrated that why was I like that? What a waste, and just, I don't know, being in the closet, and because being gay is a sin. It's like, it was just a lot of self-loathing, and it's not necessarily painful. It's maddening, and I don't know.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I know what you mean. I have a I love to write, and right before my deconversion, not like right before, but in the last couple of years, I was working on some books about Christian worldview, and one of them was probably the one I was most proud of at the time was a book on prayer, where I was just taking all the things where you might say, kind of third person, God is this, God is that, God is doing this, God is doing that. I turn it into second person as a prayer and say, God, you are like this, God, you are doing this. Thank you for being this way. Thank you for doing this in history. Thank you for doing this in my life, in my heart. And it was like 1,000 pages of prayers that I had just written, and I was intending to go back over and over and refine them, probably 100 times, and add to them with, just depths of theology and insights from people like C.S. Lewis and preachers and Spurgeon and so forth. And I thought, I was just so proud of it. And I'm sure that if I go through it, I'll be like, what in the world was I thinking? Like, how do you not see past this? But I know what you mean. It's crazy, but it's probably worth it on some level if it's not too emotionally difficult for people to go back and remember some of the old ways that, to remember to make sure you're also saying, do I have any of these same habits, with the way my critical thinking skills are. Well, we've kind of touched on a little bit of your story here, so I'd love to just give you the floor to take us to the beginning. What were you taught growing up, and what was your religious background?
Well, my parents, they grew up in a very legalistic church. It's called the Apostolic Christian Church. The men sat on one side and the women on the other side, and they had to wear dresses and follow rules. And it was just, and some of my cousins still go to this church back in Indiana. But so that's where they grew up, and you had to join the church, ask an elder for permission to marry. The men would go to the elders, hey, I want to marry this lady. And the elder would go to the lady, hey, so-and-so wants to marry you, pray about it. What do you think? And that's how my parents got married, and we were apostolic Christians growing up. Then my mom, she was like 30, left the apostolic church and went more to a charismatic Pentecostal church. And I just remember as a kid, my mom and dad always fighting about religion. And my mom just thought she just knew that the charismatic was the true Christianity. And my dad's like, no, what's the problem? But there's a lot of fighting and over religion. And it was just, and I have 9 brothers and sisters.
9? Wow, that's a big family. Would you say that they agreed on the basics? Like, I know people have different nuances, whether it's something simple as which version of or translation of the Bible they use, which version, or something, do you baptize children or not? But like in terms of the core, like how do you get right with God? Did they have any kind of agreement there that they could find fellowship on?
I think so. I think, they agreed that Jesus died and rose from the grave and died for our sins. But my mom's like, we need to be speaking in tongues and stuff like that. And don't take your kids to the doctor. God will heal them. And that kind of stuff.
Wow.
So, and for a while, the church she was going to, she'd take us with her. And it was like an hour away or more, hour and a half. Then we started having church in the basement. One of their friends came and was preaching in our basement. His name was Paul Portlow. And I was 11. And I had remembered like a sexual abuse as a little kid. And that really messed me up with my head. I was very like wanting to die, I guess, as an 11-year-old because
of something that happened to you.
Yeah. And I was just crying during this basement service, just on the floor crying, just like, because I don't know how to, Anyway, that's when I decided to accept Jesus into my heart and become saved, because I wanted this death wishing to go away, So I got saved and I felt better, the next couple of days. I'm like, oh, good, yay. But
can I ask about that? Was the motivation like to get rid of shame, over what had been done, or was it more just like you just wanted a hope of heaven? Like what was the big motivation to proceed with believing in Jesus?
It was to I wanted Jesus to save me, take away my sin, I guess, of hating myself for what happened to me, not because I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't tell anyone for a while.
Did the church have that as part of their theology as well, where regardless of what had happened to individuals, did they say stuff like God, hates the sin in you so much that he, in a sense, hates you, his wrath is against you?
I don't think so, not
Okay.
necessarily. It was just like when someone is abused, it just comes with the territory, the mental anguish. And I thought Jesus could take the mental anguish away, which is what I thought, but that's not how it works. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, I got saved and was happy for a couple days and went on with my life. Then through high school, I mean, the how do I say this? I guess I didn't blame myself for the abuse. And I didn't blame the person who did it. Who I blamed was my mom because of her religious beliefs. She wouldn't let her older boys play sports or have girlfriends or anything because it was against what she thought should, it was competition with sin and stuff. It was just weird. But yeah,
that's really interesting. Was it about worldliness? Was that the motivation? Like, don't be like the world?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Don't be a part of the world.
That sounds like an extreme. I mean, I went to Bob Jones University, which you may have heard of, and I've been exposed to conservative Baptists, but that's definitely an extreme I have not heard of before.
Right. Yeah. It comes from the legalistic church that they grew up in, combined with the Pentecostal stuff. And yeah, it's not healthy. But
can I go back before you talk more about your teenage years? When you said you were saved, just for anyone that doesn't, know our lingo, Christianese, what was actually happening when someone gets saved, like behind the scenes between, if you were to just put it this way, in the courts of heaven, what's happening there when you get saved?
I think what I believed happened where you had to invite Jesus into your heart to take over and control your life. And people have been, the courts of heaven, I guess, everyone's excited because you get to go to heaven when you die.
And in terms of the sin issue, like would the preacher or your parents and teachers, would they have said it like Jesus is your substitute, like you should have died on the cross, but he's dying for you? Is that
right? Yes.
Okay.
He died for your sins, so you don't have to pay the price. He paid the price.
Okay. And then if you identify with his death and resurrection through faith, you basically get to inherit the resurrection. You get to, just like he resurrected as the first one, the main person involved in this story, you get to follow his path that he trailblazed for us and resurrect as well someday.
Right. Okay. Yay. Hallelujah.
Yeah. So what would you say, you mentioned the word, it was good for a few days. Could you dive into that a little bit more? Like, was it bad within a month, or like, what was that like?
It was just, I guess, the thrill, the excitement of, because my mom was happy. She's like, you need to tell people. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll tell people. And I, for a while, was the center of attention, having 9 brothers and sisters. And I guess I was just in a good mood, put in a better mood.
Did your siblings do something similar?
Yeah. Not necessarily. I don't know exactly. I think my older sister said she got saved when she was 5. I think they all just pretty much generally accepted God during church services or campus life. Campus life was like a high school ministry. Like
responding to an altar call where the preacher said, do you want to receive Jesus? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Did you feel like you could sense that God was present in your life? It kind of before the other stuff we're going to get into. Did you feel like God was present there? Or like, did you ever have a time when you just thought, God, I'm going through a rough time, and then either just emotionally you felt He was present, or something happened, you thought that was God. God was clearly coming through. Like, what were the solid points of communion, so to speak, with you and God at that time?
Okay. Um, when I can tell a story, when I
Yeah.
was, I think, 7, my mom would always tell us to pray to God if we need anything. You'd ask God, and if we were in trouble, we would say the blood of Jesus, and it would protect us from things. So I just remember if a bumblebee came around, the blood of Jesus, it would, not sting me.
Mm.
And for one specific time I remember as a kid, I could not find my jacket. It was my favorite jacket, and I could not find it. It's like, Mom, where is my jacket? I don't know. Why don't you ask God? So I prayed, dear God, where is my jacket? And then I had the thought, look behind the couch. So obviously that was God telling me to look behind the couch. And sure enough, there it was. Just stuff like that. Not necessarily, I never really had like an emotional calm come over me for certain things or feel His presence, except maybe during worship at church. But
Sure.
yeah, just stuff like that.
A lot of people growing up in the church also talk about things like a calling, or just a sense of God's putting a burden on your heart. Did you have any sense from just your own personal time in the Bible, or your classes or church, that God was pulling you to do anything, like to be a missionary, or to be a wife and mother, or to do some specific, like what are you doing for the kingdom, so to speak? Did you have anything like that pop up over the years?
Yeah, I thought my role in life was to get married and have kids. That's what I was going to do. And that's that was my plan, because I was a woman, a female. So that get married, have kids, be a stay-at-home mom was my calling. And I thought I'd have lots of kids and send them on the mission field. I don't want to go on the mission field. No, thank you. But yeah, raise a bunch of Christian kids was my calling, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, what happened next in the story after you if you're at the point where you've come to faith in Christ and you're going to church, and probably, I assume, doing all the things that Christians do, you get exposed to the gospel and to the word, and get around Christian people. What were some of the next parts of the story?
Well, I went through school, middle school. That was not, it was still with my mental anguish, I guess, because it didn't go away. And
Christian school or secular school?
No, it was public school.
Okay.
That's the one thing my parents did right, was let us go to public school. Geez, to homeschooled us or Christian school. Blech. But yeah, so no offense. But yeah, so middle school was rough for me, just with my mentality. And then high school, I started going, I mentioned campus life. It's a high school ministry where, I don't know, older people come in and make things fun for the high schoolers. They do fun things. They have meetings, and it's very entertaining. So I started going there, and they had a special, like a guest speaker come in who was, I don't quite remember if he was involved in the occult or something, and now he wasn't anymore. But he was talking, and I think I was in 10th grade. And he had mentioned, when you have those thoughts in your head, like, oh, I'm worthless, or oh, I'm whatever, this or that. He's like, those are demons. They can impersonate you and speak to you in first person. I'm like, what? And my mind was blown. I'm like, this whole time I'm listening to demons.
Wow. That'll do a mind job on you.
Yeah. And I was like, well, that's it then. I just need to tell them to shut up. and
Mm.
because I believed it. And so, yeah, so that for a while I was like, if I started getting, bad thoughts, I was like, oh, you're a demon. I'm not listening to you.
Reminds me a lot
So,
of Frank Peretti. Have you heard of the
oh yeah,
author?
I read one of his books.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this present darkness and all that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get that idea almost that if you're in church, let's say it's a church with like a really high ceiling, that there's like angels and demons up there like sucker punching each other, like like a demon's
Right.
trying to get you to to think about something you shouldn't, or just to be sleepy and not listen to the sermon, and the angels up
Mhm.
there trying to like almost like roller derby, like nudge the demon out, get out of here, let Rachel focus on the preacher, and
Right.
or even worse, where they're like sword fighting, and like if the angel somehow has to disappear for a minute, like the demon could come down and just like really do some damage to you, either
Mhm.
physically or to your brain or emotions. It's crazy that the way that they set that up. I was curious, could you back up just a little bit? You said that your teenage years were still difficult with your mentality. What mentality are you referring to there?
Just, I guess being not, my mental health, I guess, was not good. I was very just self-loathing and wanting to die.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, suicidal, I guess. And not, I guess I was suicidal, but I never did anything
Still
about it.
because of what had happened to you as a child?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Did
and
it?
maybe I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, please go ahead.
Maybe it just became a habit for me as well, just to, let my head go there. You just let me be just hating myself, I guess.
Hmm.
Maybe that it became a habit. Um,
Did it bother you that you hear songs about the joy of the Lord will be my strength. The Lord will restore the years that the locusts have eaten. The peace of God that passes all understanding will guard your heart and mind. Did it ever bother you that you weren't experiencing what everyone else was supposedly experiencing and singing about?
yeah, I guess I, obviously blamed myself. There's something wrong with me. Why am I like this? Why isn't God fixing me? You know?
Hmm.
So,
That's an
yeah.
incredible burden for a teenager to bear.
It was, yeah. And I was also, I mean, it's not constantly, but I had a lot of fun too. And,
Hmm.
with my friends and stuff. It was just occasionally I would just get down. And
Hmm.
then, yeah, so
When you were going through some of the harder parts of that, did you feel like you could talk to anybody in your family or circle of friends about it, or was it just like just you and God?
it was just me and God mostly. And later on, I would tell my mom because when I first told her what happened to me, because I was just very sad and grumpy and just upset about it. And she's like, "Why are you like this?" And I go, "None of your sisters are like this." And well, maybe they didn't have what happened to me happen to them. What happened to you? And I told her, and then she's like, "Well, you should hear what so and so's brothers did to her." I'm like, oh, another reason to feel because it's not that bad. So another reason to be like, "Oh, brother, what's my fault again?"
Hmm.
But it turns out my other sister had stuff happen to her, but she just doesn't remember it. She blocked it.
Hmm.
But anyway.
That's crazy. It really does. I mean, there's so many different topics that you're touched on. Obviously, the minimalizing of the pain of
Mhm.
what hurts you is what hurts you, even if someone else doesn't think it's that bad. But just the idea of going through years and years and years of exposure to the gospel and to the Bible and having no lasting joy, it's one
Mhm.
of the biggest issues on my mind, like all the time. For example, I've got some people that I know in my world that I'm thinking of some people that are much older, like in elderly at this point, who they grew up in the church. They listened to the gospel. They listened to Christian radio all the time. When they retired, they listened to the gospel radio, 3 or 4 hours a day, just as a background, hearing preachers and Christian music all day long. And they're some of the most cantankerous people that I've ever met, and just ugly, ugly spirits. And I think,
Mhm.
where is the power of the gospel? And it really does shock me that it doesn't seem to bother Christians that this
Right.
gospel that they say it, the word of God will not go out and be empty. It won't be void. It'll go and do whatever God tells it to accomplish, and it has power. The word of God is like a double-edged sword, and there's power in the spirit. The Spirit's working in you, and it's like if there's so much power in the gospel and the word and the Spirit, why are people
Where is
so
it,
empty?
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
for
it even
sure.
says like when our friends die or family die, don't grieve like those who have no hope. Grieve like you have a hope of resurrection. And again, Christians, when someone dies, they're just like, oh, this is awful. This is terrible. Like,
Right.
why is it so terrible? You think you're gonna see them again in a few years. They're in
Yeah.
heaven dancing with a perfect body in your mind, in your theology. What is the point? Like, where is your peace and joy? If it, there should be nothing when a Christian dies, other Christians should basically be having a party.
Right.
And it's like, you didn't die in a negative sense. You graduated to glory. This is
Mhm.
the point of this is the culmination, what we're waiting for. I get to see Christ face to face. What a wonderful thing. And they're like, oh, this is so sad. Like, where's your joy? The gospel does not have the power they claim it does.
Oh, for sure. No. Yeah. No, not at all.
Hmm.
Crazy.
You've touched on the issue of what happened to you as a child, but could you tell us, was this about the time that some of your thoughts about sexuality began to shift, or when did that come into the equation?
Um, it was pretty much there all along. I remember being attracted to like girls that were a little older than me as a kid, but I was also attracted to boys too as a kid. Um, in high school, I was attracted to boys, and it was confusing. I never really dated in high school. I went on a couple pity dates. I was like, well, they asked me out. I might as well go. It took some courage to ask me out. And it was like when I would see like ladies on TV, it wasn't so much, I was like, I'm not attracted to her. I don't want to be with her. I want to be her. That's how I justified it in my head. It's like, no, that's not it. You're not attracted. You just want to be her. You want to be like her. It wasn't attraction, apparently, I told myself. And yeah, so it wasn't like when I finally realized that I was attracted to the same sex attraction, that's when I was like, oh crap, I can't, now I have to deal with this. I can't be that way. I can't be gay and a Christian. And it was just something that this is more in my 20s now. Something again that brought on self-loathing and why am I this way? Why did God make me this way? Why can't he take this way? And I sought some counseling for it. I went to his name is Bob Sutter. I don't know if he's still alive, but he was an older guy from the Apostolic Church, and he was a counselor. And I went to him, and he gave me a book to read about overcoming the abuse that happened to me, and don't continue to sin by dwelling on it, which it helped. So yeah, so that finally I was able to get past that whole thing. And he asked me one session, he's like, is there anything else you want to tell me that you just haven't mentioned? And then I told him, well, yeah, I have same-sex attraction. And he's like, okay. And he compared it to being an alcoholic. Like sometimes, which I don't think is true, alcoholics have a predisposition. They're predisposed to become alcoholics. And I have a predisposition to be gay, but I just need to not act on it. And just sorry about you. You have that predisposition, just like being an alcoholic. And it's like, what? What? You mean God made me this way, predisposed me to be this way, and I'm not allowed to act on it? He makes like the heteros predisposed to want to fornicate, but at least they can get married and act on it. It was just the worst. It was like, oh, brother.
Mm.
But yeah.
Had your
So
church ever preached about that, like in a sermon about as being sin or anything like that?
I don't think they ever specifically talked about it. And I don't even know how I got the idea that it was wrong. I don't know. They must have at some point preached. Maybe I heard it from my parents, or you just, gays are bad. They just want to sin. And I'm not exactly, and I know I've read my Bible. So yeah, I knew Leviticus and what Paul says about it and stuff like that. So maybe that's, I don't know. And maybe just at the time, what is it, the 2000s, in the 90s, that people weren't accepted. It was still kind of a culture. It wasn't culturally accepted so much
So
as
would
it
you
is more now.
would you say you just took the position to kind of try to repress it all at that point?
Yeah, I thought I needed to get married and it would go away. So I was looking for a husband, pray the gay away. And that's what I thought would fix it. And I had told my mom that when I think I was 26, I confessed it to her that I had struggling or something I struggled with. And she wanted me to go talk to this lady who was supposedly a prophetess. Her name was Dana. And I was like, I am not going to her because I don't think she's a real Christian. I didn't believe that kind of Christianity. I was more of a John MacArthur type Christian, not necessarily a Calvinist, but more, a cessationalist, where the speaking in tongues and stuff was for that certain time in the New Testament, not for now, stuff like that. If that makes, it's a lot of words.
That's interesting that you were into him. I wouldn't have expected you to add that because it is very different from your background. That's the background I grew up in, was the John MacArthur background very much. And I voluntarily listened to his sermons endlessly.
Yeah.
I mean, he massively informed my Christian worldview.
Right. Yeah, same. Yeah. I guess because I knew better, I didn't buy into the charismatic stuff. Yeah. I didn't think it was too chaotic. And the Bible somewhere says God is not the author of chaos. And it's very chaotic. So I was not going to go to this lady because I was not going to get exorcised or whatever it is. But because I
did you ever
that
with your feelings, did you ever actually at that point, while you were in one sense hoping to get married and fix the problem that way, so to speak, did you ever come across anyone where you thought, I'd like to actually go spend some time with her? I'd like to actually go on a date or something. Did that come across your mind at all? And how did you deal with like anything related to those kinds of attractions?
Okay. Yeah. I when I was 30, I moved up to Fort Wayne and started going to a church up there, and the young adults group, where you can go find someone to get married to. There was a girl there, and I just instantly, of course I cracked a joke, made her laugh, blah, blah, blah. And we just clicked, and nothing, I never acted on anything, but we were just very good friends, I guess. And we hung out all the time. And then I started dating this guy, and I was not interested in him. I had never kissed anyone till I kissed this guy. And I was like, oh, this is kissing. I haven't missed out on anything. But yeah, because purity culture and all that played a role through my 20s and all that stuff. And Joshua Harris? I read his book.
Yeah, I guess
in my early 20s. But yeah, so that was a missed opportunity with this girl. If I would have just been fine with myself, it would have been more fun. But no, I never Not till I moved to Chicago did I go on my first gay date. But yeah, still. So yeah.
Hmm.
Since then, I've had girlfriends.
As I know we're going to talk more, steer it eventually to, your faith journey, but just in terms of the whole, how that topic relates to your walk with God, did you feel like it came down to a kind of like what's the word, a crossroads or a fork in the road where you had to make a choice? It was either like obey God, get married to a man, have lots of babies, the homeschooling mother kind of motif, go that route. Or if you pick a different route, you're kind of bucking the system and saying, God, I purposefully am making this conscious choice. I'm not going to do it your way. I know it's going to have probably consequences. You're going to judge me and, condemn me and do whatever you have to do to bring me back to the kingdom, kicking and screaming, whatever. But I'm going to disobey. Did it feel like that it was that kind of like one way or the other, or was there like any kind of middle road for you in the journey?
I think if I didn't actually like have that type of conversation with myself, but I did feel like if I would fall into a relationship with a girl, then I could not be a Christian because I would not be accepted as a Christian, as a gay Christian. Because as far as I knew, they were incompatible according to the Bible and stuff. So
Did it terrorize you to think that you might be becoming a heretic or an apostate?
I never thought it would ever happen. I never even forced, I thought atheists were the worst. And
we're the worst.
Yeah, the stereotypical whatever Christians think about atheists is what I thought. And I never even questioned the religion. I did question, I was having a conversation with my older brother, my late 20s. I was like, how can there be free will if God knows everything that's going to happen? And I could not wrap my head around that. So that's kind of not necessarily where I started doubting anything. I was just like, this doesn't make sense. How is it can this be? And then at the same time, my other sister, was going to go to the Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, that's not real Christianity. That's demons. That's pagan stuff. But anyway, she went anyway. And
I've had just a teeny little bit of exposure to that worldview in that school, and it's very, very minor, but when you're not used to it, it blows you away with what they're into. And it's, of course, for those that are into it, I'm sure it feels like you're like finally on fire, and finally you're admitting the spiritual realm that you're kind of pretending isn't there is actually there, and you're finally connected to it for real. And it's like you're embracing reality for the first time from their perspective. And it's amazing, that world.
Right. Yeah. Because when my sister was going to go to that school, I did a little research on, what all started when people first started like feeling the spirit during worship and, going, whatever it is they do, they cry and just feel very emotional. Turns out that repeating music over and over, like a verse over and over and over, will put you in a different mental state. And I was like, Sarah, that's what's happening there. It's not God. It's not the Holy Spirit. And I helped her move out there. And I went to the church, to Bethel, and the worship service. And sure enough, repeat. They were repeating the same song, the same verse over and over. And people started crying and just getting very emotional. And it's like, it's how the brain works. It's not God.
Yeah. It's like a form of like a trance or being mesmerized.
Yeah. And it's very primed. They very much primed the pump, built it up, and people were reacting to what was put on them.
I've always been amazed too when you look at that dynamic, and I think it's awesome that you try to bring that to her attention because it's such a big piece of this. But
Mhm.
what's amazing to me is when you also look at the makeup of the congregation, some of the people, I mean, it's always going to be this way, whether it's a church or anywhere you look at where there's a large group of people, there's going to be some people that are really, really, really hurting,
Mhm.
where they're struggling with questions of maybe they're doubting their faith, or they're just struggling with some kind of physical issue where it's health or money, or a relationship that's broken. Something's not going well, and if you add that up a few times, or maybe somebody thought they were going to get married and their boyfriend broke up with them, and then someone thought they're going to get married again and that didn't work out, and all of a sudden you're just like, God, I thought you wanted me to get married, have kids, what's the deal? And you feel crushed inside, or you're like, God, I really wanted to do this job, and it just doesn't work out. I keep, the door's never open, and you
Mhm.
get this sense, this drawing in of like, yes, it feels to you like the doors aren't opening, but you need to understand, like that picture of, like, how when you are making a tapestry, they'll show you on the back side of it, it looks like loose strings that are kind of ugly and random. And they said God's going to flip it at some point, and you'll see He's been building a beautiful picture. And they get you kind of like on the edge of your seat, but you get someone, and I admit readily, I felt this myself, what I'm about to say, but you get someone that's on the edge of grief, and you get them the priming, the repetition, and you sing certain words, certain songs, and God's about to break through with
Mhm.
glimmering light. Like, I'll add this if I can real quick. There was this one situation I had where I dated this girl. I'm here in Atlanta. I dated this girl down in Florida, down in Lakeland, Florida, and it was long distance, but we traveled a lot back and forth. We'd drive or fly a lot. We saw each other, and for about a year we dated, and then we got engaged. And I mean to tell you, I'd gone through some hard stuff before then, and I thought, God is just restoring the years the locusts have eaten. This is so beautiful. And 1 month before the wedding, she comes here. We've been going through premarital counseling, as you do. And she sits there and tells the counselor, I have never been treated better in my life. Tim treats me so well, so much respect, so much love, so much kindness. She's like, he treats me way better than my parents ever have. And I was, of course, proud to hear that she would testify to that. And it was so beautiful. And it was like 1 month left to the wedding. And she goes back to Florida and thinking, in a month, I'm going to see her again for the wedding. And shortly after that, I come home from work one day. This is before, cell phones, or where you have your email on your cell phone. It was like flip phone still. So I come home from work and I check email, and I get an email from her saying, it's completely over. Don't bother calling. I'm not going to explain it. It's completely over. I was like, what? I was like,
Wow.
we've been together for 18 months. We talk every day, 2 or 3 times a day. Like, I thought at first it was either a joke or someone else who read the email. I was like, there's no way this is real. And it was absolutely, literally real. And she never picked up the phone. She never answered an email again. Her whole family cut me off immediately. And of course, it's just accusations fly. Oh, you must have been abusive to her. You must have this. I'm like, no, I wasn't really. Like, I truly wasn't. I was so good to her. And I
Mhm.
find out later through the grapevine, the day she was going to marry me, she married somebody else. And of course, it absolutely crushed me to no end. Especially just thinking sexually, like when I was thinking I was going to have sex with her, she's having sex with someone else. That part of it was just endlessly crushing. But because we'd waited, we were pure.
Right.
But
Yeah.
when you get someone like this, just an example, you get someone like that the next Sunday where you're in church, and they're just like, God's going to come in and just flood you with peace and restoration. I mean, it can bring you to almost a point where you're bawling in tears, like, God, yes,
Mhm.
come in and bring victory, bring restoration, bring some answers here. And in a group that big of church, you get people that are desperate for help.
Right.
Did you
Yeah.
ever feel like that was like they were almost like talking to you like, Rachel, you're desperate and God's got the answers?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I recommitted several times,
Hmm.
asked Jesus into my heart again several times. Um, I don't know that I was ever at the point where I was just so upset about something at church where I would break down. Um, yeah, I'm not like a real emotional person, I guess, in general,
Mhm.
but
It's
for,
probably good as a safeguard against that kind of manipulation.
yeah. Yeah. And because I was more of a John MacArthur Christian, I knew it was like emotional manipulation when stuff like that was happening to
Yeah.
other people.
Hmm.
So,
what happened next in your story?
well, I moved to Chicago and popped my head out of the Christian bubble. And yeah, the age 34, I decided, like I said, decided to move to Chicago and try comedy. Met some friends up there, and that's kind of when the internet was starting, like YouTube and stuff. And I had a lot of free time, and I started. I think I first found like the Atheist Experience, which is here, it's an online show here in Austin,
Hmm.
and started listening to that. And like the Matt Dillahunties, and he was making more sense than the people calling in. And I was like, well, that's interesting, and stuff like that. I was still listening to John MacArthur at the same time, a lot of his sermons.
That's so awesome. That John MacArthur and Matt Dillahunty at the same time.
Right.
Oh wow.
So yeah.
It's like
And then
Yoda hanging out with Darth Vader.
So I still was a Christian, and I was still thinking I will find a man to marry. Maybe this is where he is. Maybe God will bring him to me in Chicago. Went on a couple dates here and there, fooled around, blah, blah, blah. And
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Did you feel like you would have to, if something had gotten serious with a man, were you afraid of a conversation where you'd have to say, I want to get married to you, but I do have these feelings
Yeah,
on the side?
I feel like I felt, yes, I would have to be honest with him. And I was planning on it if it ever did happen. I was planning on being honest with him. And just being with men finally, not necessarily doing the deed, but I was just like, what is this? I don't like this. This isn't fun for me. And then I would tell, you just need to find the right guy. It's just because it's not the right guy. All right, keep looking, I guess. Because yeah, I just wasn't into it. It's like, all right, here we go. Okay, yay. Not, nothing. But yeah, so back to the deconverting, and I'll touch on the other stuff too. Stumbled upon Robert M. Price. I just got a kick out of his sense of humor and how he was reading what he called the human Bible. And he was funny, and I liked him. And finally, I came across Bart Ehrman, and was listening to him, and he had said, read the Gospels horizontally. Normally when I read the Bible, start Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, just start from beginning to end. And I remember when I would read the Bible, and I'd be like, this sounds familiar, like this story in Mark happened in Matthew, and didn't really think any more about it. Finally, Bart Ehrman had suggested to read the Bible horizontally, which means compare each resurrection version with all of them, like Matthew's version, Mark's version, and, all the repeat stories, compare them and see how different they actually are. And I did that, and I was like, holy cow, this is not true. There's no way. Because, as a Christian, you were told it's because it's a different perspective. It's like, I see it, the car looked navy. No, the car's actually dark black, just little minor things that are different. But when I compared like the birth stories and the resurrection stories and And I was just like, there's no way this is just because someone saw it a little different. Like, no. And I was like, yeah, Christianity is not. And it was pretty quick. It was just pretty much when it hit me. And I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm not believing this anymore. It doesn't make sense. It's, and plus some of the Robert and Price would explain where some of the Old Testament stories came from. So I guess it wasn't just like that. There was things that would make me like, oh, okay. But when I did compare the Gospels, I was like, okay, yeah. Because for a hot second, I thought maybe I needed to be a Jew or a Noahic Jew, the Noahide laws.
Yeah.
So that was something. Oh, yeah. My brother had sent me a documentary that was supposed to take down Catholics and, prove why Catholics are wrong. And I was thinking, this is basically what we believe too. And, virgin sacrifice, innocence for death. I don't know, but whatever. Just kind of a jumbled thing. And by 35, 36, I was an atheist. And
from when you started listening to Matt Dillahunty and Robert Price and Bart Ehrman, how much time from the very first period that started to when you deconverted? Was it just like a year or two or less?
About 2 years. I was all through when I was living in Chicago is when it all just kind of, and I was there for 2 years. So when I moved back, I had some debates with my family members and stuff like that. Told them I don't believe this anymore. And they weren't like, they never shunned me or, disowned me or anything. They're pretty decent people in general. And we still get along. And it was just that then they still pray for me, obviously. But yeah. So yeah, I moved back basically and was dating again online, doing online dating, hung out with a couple guys. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to switch it to women. And went on a date with a lady. And when I knew it wasn't like going to be for keeps or whatever, but when we did stuff, I was like, this is what it's supposed to feel like. I'm supposed to actually want to be with them. And so then I came out of the closet, and yeah, it was when gay marriage got legalized. My one sister, Rose, she's like, I wonder what Rachel thinks about it. And I would go, well, I'm not marrying a man. So that's basically, and then I came out on the other YouTube channel, the Fort Wayne Famous thing, and shared that with Facebook, and some people were surprised. But
did you get much backlash from people?
No, not really, which is, I think people just back in, in Indiana, they don't, like my family, we don't like to confront things or just everything's just under the rug and pray, let God deal with it. So no, nothing really.
It's interesting that I don't know if this is a dynamic that's related to what you're saying, but something I've noticed when I was growing up, if there were someone that wasn't a believer that was in your mind, in discussions, maybe there was always this sense of like hope and pray, like you said, but be ready to talk to them about the gospel if you can. This sense of like, even if it's the last, couple of days of their life or the last hour of their deathbed, like hope till the very last minute and keep them on your mind. And they would use these examples of people who would pray every day. They'd be like, I prayed for 20 years for my, cousin to get saved. And, he got cancer. He got serious about his death and realized he needed to get right with God. And bam, after 20 long years, he got saved. And it was this sense of like, be wrapped up and just absolutely envisioning their future salvation. It's got to be your focus. They're going to get saved. And even if you think theologically, maybe they're not elect, maybe they won't get saved, act like you know that this is life and death, because it's eternal life and death. And you have to just just pretend that you know that these efforts, not pretend, but live in a way that you know that your efforts will produce the fruit. And either way, your job is to just be faithful. Live as if they're going to get saved, but either way, leave that on God. Be faithful to your calling, which is to preach and live the gospel. And that, I remember hearing that so much, and it seems like there's been this shift. And I'd be curious to hear if you think you'd agree with this at all, but there's been this mental shift of like how people will sometimes talk about how on Facebook we all, we like the groups we like and we don't like the groups we don't like. So we don't hear other opinions that much unless we purposely go to hear a different opinion. And sometimes you'll get into these discussions where someone will say something political, like, oh, I wish so-and-so were in office. And the other person will respond and say, oh no, if they did, there'd be all these horrible policies and you're an idiot. And you end up getting burned enough that people basically stop arguing. A lot of times they just kind of say, all right, well, you think that, I think this, and obviously your mind's made up, and obviously I think differently. So we'll go our separate ways. And it's almost like that's kind of transferred into the Christian world, where it's like, okay, you don't believe in Jesus? All right, well, tough luck. It's really a shame that you're kind of giving the finger to God, but you know what? I can't convince you. You know the gospel already. You know enough to get saved. If you've rejected it, that
Right.
sad to say, but it is what it is. It's in God's hands. And it's almost like more of a hands off, like you don't hear that passionate, I'm going to pray and pray and pray for you. It's just like, oh, well, sad story, but that's your life, your choice. Do what you want. If you want to throw your life away, fine, throw it away. And it's sad in a sense, because it reflects again the idea that they don't even really believe the gospel has that much power. They're living like, well, if you've ever truly known the gospel, like truly known it, not like you were deceived or you were a cult, you were a different false religion, but you truly were exposed to the pure gospel of Christ, of salvation through a sacrificial death in your behalf, and that his propitiation on your behalf is what saves you. God covers you in Christ, totally apart from your works. It's just Christ alone who saves you. If you truly know that gospel through and through, and you say, no, thank you, they're like, all right, wash my hands of you. And it really exposes their it's like they're showing their cards. They're really not that concerned about your soul. And they're quite happy to just walk away and say, oh, well.
Right. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's it's an easy way to be, I guess. Well, give it to God. God doesn't want you in heaven. What am I going to do about it? Which, and I've asked my family, like, are you going to know I'm not in heaven? No. So what's the big deal? They're just like, that they want me in heaven, but they're not going to know I'm not in heaven. And it's just weird.
So you don't think they would be thinking that they would know that you're being tortured in hell?
I don't think they want to know that. I think in heaven, they're just going to be, no, they don't want to know that I'm being tortured in hell. And why? Because then it wouldn't be heaven, right?
Well, there are verses that talk about different. There's obviously like the one that's probably even Christians would take it as a parable with Lazarus in in Abraham's bosom, and the rich man, where but they can see each other, heaven to hell, always he's burning in hell. But there's even verses to talk about, someday we will look on the corpses of the bodies that God has condemned, and we will rejoice. We'll rejoice, that they are being punished. And I've often thought, like I think you're alluding to, that how could you really be happy if you know I'm being tortured?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think they would say to that?
They would say, I don't know. It's a mystery. They brush it off as a mystery. We will find out when we find out, I guess. Yeah. Yeah. So
can I ask about the deconversion process? You mentioned it didn't take too long in the big picture, but when you were actually kind of in the final stages of it, did it shake you up a lot to realize the implications of what you were kind of admitting to yourself?
It made me, like, when I realized that it wasn't true, I felt like I was duped my whole life. It made me mad. And I went through an angry atheist phase. Like on my Instagram, there's all these memes about God, and I'm just and I was pretty vocal about it. Some of I was reading, did some videos where I would read some Bible verses and be like, what, kind of doesn't make, mocking it a little bit. But yeah, so I was kind of mad. It's like, what is, I'm going to tear down Christianity if it's the last thing I do. But yeah, no, my family would see some of the stuff I would post, but they didn't affect them. They didn't change their mind. So then I got over that now.
How about just the personal stuff? Like I assume you thought you were going to go to heaven since you had a relationship with Christ at some point. Did it shock your system to realize that that was probably not what was in store for you in the future?
No, not really. I was just like, I don't believe it. So it made me appreciate life more, actually, realizing this is all there is. Made me appreciate it more.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Rather than, well, let's just wipe my feet. Let's get in the door of heaven. So yeah, and there's just a lot of it that doesn't add up. A lot of Christianity that doesn't add up. And I was a young earth creationist and that too. And it's just like, yeah, it's mind-boggling to think about the universe and everything. And I can't quite figure it out, but still, it just is amazing. More and more amazing to think that this is a natural occurrence rather than a supernatural one. I don't know.
I know what you mean. It kind of flooded into my mind the same way, where it was very much like even within an hour, literally, I kind of like had all these things I was investigating. And for whatever reason, the cognitive dissonance, you find a way to either explain it away or to think that you will find a way at some point to explain it and harmonize it and rationalize it. Defend it. But at some point I was like sitting here at the computer 2 years ago exactly. This is my 2-year exit anniversary. But I was just sitting here and something was like the whatever you call it, when you're playing Jenga and you're pulling the little pieces out and you're thinking you're still fine and you pull that one out and that's it. It crumbles. And or you finally hit the domino and it goes. And it was like instant. And I felt like, in the Matrix where he jacks him in and he teaches them jujitsu in like 2 minutes or 10 seconds. It felt like that, like all of a sudden, all this information just came flooding in. The pieces came. And I would say I went through something where I was angry too, but I was more like, I don't know how to put it. Maybe it was like a bit of a comedy side to it. Like if you were to think of your life as the Wizard of Oz, and you're just wrapped up in this Oz character, and he's going to give you a heart and a brain and this, he's going to get you back to Kansas, but he's just this all-powerful Oz. And then you see this stupid little man sitting behind the curtain. Yes, you're angry because he's such a deceiver, but you're like, this is really stupid. Like, this is really stupid. This is a little man sitting behind a curtain pulling levers. Like, why did I think this was so real? And I think it felt to me like I'd won the lottery, like thinking how easy would it have been if the chips had just fallen slightly differently, that I would have never picked up, like if it was your story, I would have never tuned into Matt Dillahunty that day and maybe never come across him. And I never tuned into Robert Price and I never came across him again, blah, blah, blah. And some Christian got me to some church and this church was just my personality to a T. And I got wrapped up. And then I was just in church for the rest of my life till the day I died. I thought the chips could have fallen so differently and I easily could have been duped. I'm like, I can't believe the fragility of this whole construct. And yet I made it. I'm out. That's the point. I got out. And it felt like the lottery, thinking, all my friends, they might not get out. Like, this is crazy. And that, I think, was the biggest hardship for me, was realizing if I'm out, and even if I can explain really well why I left, if they basically say, fingers in your ears, la, 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 I don't want to hear it, then that has radical implications for the rest of my life, where basically I'm inviting myself to be ostracized and shunned, potentially to an exponentially big level, where, who knows the ramifications of the relationships that are going to they're going to die basically
Right.
all because you said, I don't believe in a Canaanite demigod called Yahweh and his mythical son, Jesus. And yet they're willing to cut off real relationships that are right in front of their face for the sake of, some mythological crown in heaven that they're never going to actually get. And it breaks your heart, but you're like, wow, this is going to screw my life up in some ways. And
Right.
you hear of people who kind of say to themselves, I don't think I want to talk about this too boldly, kind of like, coming out conversations. Like, you weigh when is the right time, because you feel like this could blow up in my face if I don't do it the right way.
Right. Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm kind of the one that separated myself from my family. Like, I moved back for 6 years before I moved here. And I'm thinking maybe they would evolve and grow, maybe be more accepting of my sexuality and, just change a little bit. But they never did. And I can only be around the God conversation and hold my tongue for so long, because once I went through my angry phase, I was like, you know what, let it be. Don't chime in every time and try and make your points, because it's not going to work. So finally I was just like, I gotta get out of here. I mean, I love my family and they still love me. We're not on bad terms by any means, but if I were to find someone to do life with, they would just not be comfortable with it. They would, and they would not be happy for me. And it was just, so I more separated myself from them.
Yeah.
Just for my own sanity, I guess. So, but yeah, we still get along. I healed a lot, grew a lot. And so, yeah, I'm not so much ready. I still want to take down Christianity, but I don't know.
You mentioned the word
eventually.
Healing. Yeah, eventually. We'll brick by brick. Pew Research and all those other research groups, they're giving some good signs. So
yeah,
signs are that it's dying.
Right. My older niece and nephews, they're not religious at all. My younger ones still are, but I feel like it can't last with all the information out there, especially with the internet, like how the printing press changed the world. The internet is doing the same thing. And yeah.
It's a good point. And I think too, just current events, people are looking at the church's response to Donald Trump, and they're looking at the church's response to everything from, Black Lives Matter to coronavirus. And they're like, if this is the church, by and large, this is garbage.
Right.
There's something wrong here. Right. Yeah, it's been crazy. I do want to step back 1 second. You mentioned the word healing a couple minutes ago. I did want to ask if you could to share any insights you have from your experience and just any suggestions you have for the people that might be going through it, but especially this sexual part of it. There's so many of us, whether you're on your path or a path like mine, whatever it is. You mentioned purity culture. People feel for many different reasons like they're dirty, they're bad, they're sinful. You even as a little boy, you might even accidentally look at the wrong picture, dirty pictures, even in the JCPenney catalog, and you're like, oh, I should have looked at that picture and I shouldn't have kept looking at it. But whatever it is, and then you grow up and you get hormones raging, and certainly you get messages sometimes. I remember Bible college, the dean of students, or dean of men, got just the men from Bible college. It's called Lancaster Bible College. He got the men together in the dining hall area, and just man-to-man talk. And I'm thinking, we're going to have a talk about how to be passionate for Christ and change the world. One message, guys, the masturbation has to stop. And I thought, this is the best you can do. Like, this is what you get us together for once a year to talk about. But just so many messages of, and I'm sure some churches do a lot worse than that, but so many messages of blame and all that. And I know I've talked to some ladies who just talk about how maybe women who are more curvy, they find that they're kind of like treated as if they're more tempting to men. So they're trying to hide their curves, and yet they can't because they're naturally more curvy. Whatever path you take, you end up with a situation where you just feel like, wow, I haven't ever just celebrated, like really celebrated my
Mhm.
sexuality. I haven't been able to look at my, pleasuring my own body, or looking at pleasuring my future partner, or diving into fantasy or diving into eroticism, whatever it is. Like you've never had the freedom to say, yes, I give myself to this completely. And for so many people, that is such a hard path to heal and to reclaim their sexual identity, let alone the rest of it. Just in terms of either your own insights or suggestions you'd have for the people, how would you advise people to start to just to process what that looks like to heal?
I would say, I think I would say just with self-acceptance, this, but yeah, it's difficult when you've been told such and such is sin and this or that. Um, I don't want to say time heals all wounds, but it's kind of true. I would just say there's no such thing as sin. It's just mistakes. I mean, I'm still capable of making mistakes, but you learn from them. It's so not so much condemnation anymore. Um, yeah, like pornography. I feel like the only reason why people get addicted to it is because they're trying not to be addicted to it, and it's not as bad as everyone thinks it is, as Christians think it is. It doesn't, yeah, and I don't know. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
guess, I guess I would just say, just accept it. Accept yourself. Um, that's not sin. I mean, there are
Mm.
some bad things that can happen, but
I think that's a really profound point to make. Is this, we keep on, even when we deconstruct, we come at it almost with this inherent default of like there is sin and there is wickedness, and it's like no, that is completely part of the old way of thinking. And
mhm,
I mentioned Yoda before. I mentioned him again. Like you have to unlearn what you've learned, and to start over, you have to it's like if you had this house full of um, you know uh, some kind of chemical, you can't just go live in it. You have to take the chemical out and then push fresh air in. It's like we're drowning for the poison to go out and for fresh air to go in. And it just we have such a difficult time because I love the idea, the metaphor of like tentacles of a octopus, or maybe I should say maybe roots of a tree, where they go deep and they wrap around you, and you're like, okay, no, like I went and I took the chainsaw and I cut the tree down, and you're like, yeah, but the roots are still there,
yeah.
and you have to undo that. And I think a lot of people, from what I've heard, I get a lot of emails and feedback from people, and of course you see some things in discussion groups too, but in private emails you see people talking about how learning, number one, to be comfortable with their own body, even with pleasuring themselves, but then also to truly think through the idea that this is totally good, not in the sense of good versus evil, but like this is totally normal. Like if
Mhm,
you truly want to be erotic and passionate and involved with this, like the whole idea of, oh, I need to cover up, or I shouldn't look at that, like you just have to slowly peel the onion back and say, that's a bad idea, that was a rotten idea, that was a scummy idea, but it got drilled into me. And if you truly want to thrive, like if you really want to just be like, I'm going to celebrate my one life to the hilt, if I go out, I'm going to go out with a bang, I'm going to go out partying, I'm going to
mhm.
celebrate this life. You have to embrace your sexuality and just find a way to celebrate it, because I mean, that's, in a sense, that's what life's all about, is reproduction. It's about
Right,
connection, other people, and reproducing. And the whole planet's doing it. And for us to suddenly be like, well, it's a side issue to life, like, no, it's not.
right. Yeah. Brings life to life, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such a beautiful
Mm.
thing to be able to connect to people, that way. Um, I do want to ask, we've talked about a lot of topics, but could you compare and contrast your life as a Christian versus your life as an atheist, in terms of either just peace or how you make life decisions? Just any
Mhm.
kind of contrast you could make there.
Yeah, I cuss a lot more now. Use God's name in vain regularly. Um, but yeah, no, like the decision to move. to Austin, I kind of just let life play out. I was applying for different jobs all across the country and nothing was working out. And back in Indiana, I was working for 2 families and I liked the families very much. So finally I was like, I'm going to apply for these last 2 jobs. If they don't work out, I'm just going to make Indiana work. It'll be fine. So that's kind of how I do it. So I applied for 2 more jobs and the Austin one worked out. So here I am. That's kind of how I do. I don't pray about things. I mean, obviously I think about things and figure it out what would be best, but lots of times I just let things play out.
Yeah.
Do
you ever revert? Like some people talk about where they're like, suddenly they'll have a dream about hell, burning in hell, and they'll wake up in a sweat and think, oh, what if it was all real and I'm just deceived by the devil or self-deceived
by the devil? Oh,
do you ever go like that, kind of revert to some old ways?
I feel like, I mean, yeah, I've made this point to my family several times. I'm like, if I'm being deceived, I'm not going to know it until I die and get thrown in hell. So why am I even held accountable for being deceived? Because you don't know you're being deceived till you know you've been deceived. It's just another hole in the plot, another plot hole, I guess. But yeah, no, I don't really fear hell anymore. I did as a kid. Was it the devil that's telling me things? Is it the demon, or is it the Holy Spirit, or is it my own self? It's so confusing and stupid. But yeah, no, I don't think I've dreamt about hell in particular, but I think I've dreamt about being in church again and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say I don't think about hell at all. It's completely gone too, but I do miss, I wouldn't say like I miss this in reality, just I miss the emotional cleansing that used to happen with worship music. There's a part of me that wishes, like, I think when I first deconverted in the first year, I, not often, but maybe once every 3 or 4 months, I'd play a worship song or two, probably even some from Bethel. But I'd play 1 or 2 and just be like, it wasn't like I was trying to emotionally heal through hearing the song, but I was just trying to remember, like, what did it used to feel like? And there was this one that you might have even heard of it, but it's some lady named Jen. It was a very, very loose theologically song. It was just called "It's Gonna Be Okay," and it was sung, of course, from a Christian perspective. So even though she didn't mention Christ and the cross and all that, you kind of assume she's saying it's going to be okay because God's in charge, and it's certainly going to be okay if you let God take over. But this idea that it's going to be okay, and I remember trying to rethink, what did that feel like? How did this really affect me, and how did this song change me? And I can't recreate it in one sense because I'm like, it's so tainted by mythology. I wanted to ask on that note, I've mentioned the word mythology a few times. Was there anything in particular that stood out to you with what you learned from Dr. Price? And by the way, for anyone that doesn't know Dr. Price, go to Myth Vision's YouTube channel. Derek Lambert has Dr. Bob in there all the time. Big plug for that. If you like that, I also like to recommend Dragons and Genesis as a fantastic YouTube channel. He doesn't deal as much with Dr. Bob as much, but just Jason Folks brings a lot of great information that's similar. Lots of others. If you're more of a reader, the blog called Vridar, VRIDAR, the Vridar blog. Neil Godfrey's done a great job there. But in terms of just going through the mythology and the origins of Christianity or whatever, was there anything that stood out to you and was really a passion to you to study as you were digging?
I think it was like the Garden of Eden story. I just liked how it never occurred to me that God was the one that was lying and the devil was the one telling the truth. But of course, Christians justify it. No, it's a spiritual death. And he meant a spiritual death, blah, 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 Adam. I don't know. I didn't really much get into my own study of mythology and stuff. I just listened to Dr. Bob all the time because I liked it, and his sense of humor. So yeah, nothing. And the whole flood story, not realizing it was not original and all that stuff. Just little bits of information. new information.
Yeah, Dr. Bob is awesome. It amazes me. I've said this before, but it feels like a lot of times when you look at people who have deconverted, there's this similar dynamic that comes up where, like, when you're a Christian, especially a fundamentalist, you just cannot imagine any other explanation apart from this is the literal word of God. It was exactly, he gave us the words through his prophets and so forth, and he meant every word of it. It's faithful and trustworthy and good. And if he says, he really sent a flood, then he really did. And if you really did this, he said this, he really did. And if he wanted you to do this, he really wants you to do it. Like, it's not, unless it's clearly a parable, then you need to literally take him at his word and believe it. And
right.
And so many people, like, they can't imagine maybe this is different in a totally weird sense. Like, I think sometimes about some of the movies you watch where, you ever watched a movie where you're watching it and then all of a sudden you realize this is completely different than I thought. Like, if you're watching M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, where, you're thinking this is some kind of colonial era movie, and then you realize, no, this is modern day. It's just, and you don't know it till,
Right. Yeah.
all kinds of movies that do that kind of thing, or even, again, the Sixth Sense, where you're like, I'm the dead person.
Yeah, that one was this, I think, yeah, that one was a shocker.
Yeah, where you're like, the whole thing just shifts.
Right.
And for someone to say, I think that the biggest thing for me was realizing this Jesus person and the Yahweh person, they're effectively nothing but a literary character. They're
Right.
a Darth Vader. They're a Luke Skywalker. They're not real, but their stories are amazing.
Poorly written story, actually.
Yeah, too many writers in the editor's room. But these are literary characters, not actual people. And once you realize that, it felt to me like, if you had imagine this massive door that's so heavy, but it's on these really strong hinges that are very well oiled and greased up. When you first push it, like if you're a kid pushing this door, like, there's no way, this door is so heavy. But once you push it a little bit, it just slides, because its weight carries it. And it's amazing to me how there's just certain things that for certain people do that motion, where maybe they're thinking about, why is God letting kids get cancer and die at 3 years old? Or, why does the Epic of Gilgamesh remind me of Noah? Whatever it is, or they do something like, why do we pick these books? Now we find out there's 40 or 50 other gospels. Like, wait, why do we have 4, not 40 or 50? All different reasons, but something just says that door is now moving. And once it happens, it's so amazing. Like, the next few steps, and it shakes you up. But for some people, they're like, I am going to hold that door tight and not let it move as long as I can. And if I have to, I will just shut you all out and not listen, because this door is not moving.
Right.
Does that make that metaphor make sense?
No, that resonates. For sure.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm working on a project that it's not going to be ready for a while, but I'm working on a project that I hope is going to open that door for a lot of people. I'm excited. I almost feel like I get like a twinkle in my eye about it, because I'm just like, if you actually watch this, when I get this done over the finish line, if you actually watch this, it's going to be really hard to explain this stuff away.
Oh, nice. So, yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to forward that along.
Yeah, I will be putting it on blast when it's ready. Yeah, it's basically looking at the origins, looking at how it quotes Enoch 100 times and Jubilees dozens of times, and Pythagoras and Philo and Plutarch and Enoch and all that. Certainly Homer, Euripides, Virgil, all those good things. But I did want to wrap up by asking you, we've talked a lot about your journey. I've added some of my journey, but one of the things that always strikes me is that even as we talk about it as if it's past, it's part of our past, it's not our present. We live in a very different reality now. There are kids every day going to their homeschool or their Christian school or to church. My kids are in Sunday school this very minute, hearing songs about Jesus. There are kids all the time being taught this stuff, that they're wicked before God, and God hates the sin, and that he's going to judge them. They deserve hell. Often they deserve a literal, torturous, burning hell, and that that what they need is blood, perfect blood of a spotless lamb. When you think about kids, not as much your story, but just looking at other people, kids that are, number one, being taught this, but number two, not being taught that there's any other perspective. Like, this is the truth, and there is no other voice that's worth listening to. How do you process that, and how do you process your role in changing culture with all that going on?
Well, I have an interest. It's back in Fort Wayne. I was a nanny, and I nannied for this family. They never went to church regularly. But then the mom started sending the boy to a Catholic school to learn some Catholicism. And it was just interesting to me when he went into the church and there was like a Jesus on the crucifix. There was a crucifix, giant statue of Jesus bloody on the crucifix. And he had no idea what that was. And I went to pick him up and he's like, there is this gross statue in there. He couldn't believe it. I'm like, yeah, he'd never seen anything like that. And from a kid, they think it's gross. But all my nephews and nieces, they think it's lovely and great and wonderful because it's a great sacrifice. And I just had never occurred to me that there are kids who aren't actually exposed to that hideous picture. And a girl I dated when she was a kid, she was Catholic, and they had another bloody Jesus that freaked her out too. And but it's such a lovely, lovely story.
And so many kids in those environments who are exposed to those kind of images, statues or paintings, whatever, even just a verbal description, they're adding to it. The preachers and parents are adding to it by saying, "You realize he is there being tortured on that cross because it's your fault. You did that to him. And if you'd been the only human, he would have still had to, and he still would have done it just for you."
It's trauma. It's traumatizing. Yeah. It
amazes me too how people have a really tough time, like thinking about that picture, admitting that Christianity is basically, use a bunch of words here all at once, but it's basically a scapegoating, blood magic, human sacrifice death cult. And people are like, oh no, it's not. It's the love of Jesus. He loves us. He's the spotless lamb who takes away the sin of the world. And you're like, what does the preacher say at the Lord's Supper, at the Eucharist? What does he say? He says, I want you to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And you're like, do you not? And yet, of course, I'm saying this to myself. Do you not realize how weird it is to say, eat my flesh and drink my blood?
Right.
And also to realize no Jew of that time frame would have let that fly. They would have said, we don't have anything to do, even metaphorically, with cannibalism. That's clearly forbidden. We don't talk like that. That's against Yahweh.
Yeah, and real quick, I'll try and make this quick.
Yeah.
Like when the Leviticus, when they're writing out the laws and God requires blood, it was what Christians think. I'm like, no, that's not actually true. Because if you're poor, you can bring flour, like an ephah of flour, and it depends how much money you have is what is required for your sin sacrifice. It's not blood, not always blood, which the rabbi, I forgot to mention him, Tovia Singer. I mentioned awesome. Maybe I should be a Jew. He did a lot. Listen to him in Chicago too. That helped me think through Christianity and realize it's not true. So
Tovia Singer is awesome. I love him. I wish he would take it to the rest of the logical conclusion and just deconvert all the way, but at least he's still helpful to some of these discussions. Well, I do want to ask if there's anything. I know I've asked you a lot of questions and we've talked about a lot of stuff quickly, but is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you'd like to add to wrap us up?
Not really. I guess if people want to go check out my YouTube channel, and if they want to let me know if they like what I'm doing, maybe I'll start again or not. Otherwise, that's about it. Yeah.
Well, I will personally put my vote in the hat that I think you should definitely do it again when the time is right, when you're ready for your content. But I think your channel has absolutely got a place in these discussions, and I think you've got some great insights. So I will hope that you do pick it up again when the time is right. And I think the way you bring sarcasm in is so critical. I'm not quite ready to take my sarcasm to the degree I could maybe, but everyone's got different tones and dynamics, but there's certain people that they need that sarcasm to really be like, do you realize how silly this sounds? Whether it's like what we just talked about with the Lord's Supper or circumcision, like, do you realize how weird it sounds to say, God loves you and he made you so perfect now let's go get a knife and cut off the end of your genitals. Like, come on. There's a
Right.
place for sarcasm here. And I think you do that very well. So I appreciate that. So
I appreciate your content as well. I find it very interesting and entertaining.
thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting to be able to talk to everybody and get people's stories. But I appreciate again what you're doing. And everyone, we've been talking with Rachel Aschliman. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yep.
Awesome. And so please, again, check out her channel. The link is right beneath her video. Rachel, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's been great to get to know you.
Yeah, same. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you.